here's this framework that we put together. I hope this helps demystify a little bit about what are the components of a data culture that are identifiable. And what that can do is let us see what might be struggling, what's excelling, and then if it is struggling, like how to fix it. And I think about these kind of like a four-legged stool. If you cut one of the legs off, or if one of them's a little bit short, you might be wobbly, but you can still probably sit, for a while. You might be a little bit uncomfortable. If you cut it too short, you might actually just tip right over. But if more than one are not very strong or sturdy, then that sitting situation isn't going to work out at all. So these really do have to work in tandem, and a really effective school leader is going to think about nurturing all of these at the same time and identifying areas of improvement. So it should come as no surprise that obviously a data culture needs really strong trust first and foremost. And when you see trust in a data culture, like tell me a little bit about what that means to you, and have you ever seen that working really well in a school, let's say?
Sure. So trust is really where you'd start. And I love that that's where we're starting, because everything in a school community is around trust. There's trust between the student and the teacher. Everything is about relationships. And that's something that's hard to quantify. And I don't think that it's even fruitful to try to quantify it too much, because there's a reason that there's qualitative and quantitative science, right? Like, we are human beings, and the trust component is so important. And I think you spoke a little bit to where we maybe started with data and that pendulum swing. And when something that's supposed to be helpful is used as like a hammer or a gotcha, that erodes trust.
Yeah.
So in some ways, we're kind of moving backwards to try to build trust first, and then you can move on to the others.
That's such a great point, that I think there's a reason this one was first. And it's like, if you don't have trust of your staff, none of these other things are possible. So that really should be kind of the first order of business for a school leader. And, we talk about culture and trust among staff in lots and lots of ways. And I think the data culture component isn't that different. But I like what you said about the fact that we might be making up for some lost time here. We might be repairing damaged trust over the last who knows how many years. So that takes extra care and extra consideration that can't really be taken lightly. The next component that's really that we're going to unpack a little bit here today is the concept of targets. And there's a lot of words that we might throw around to talk about like what it is that we're measuring. We might use metrics or goals. And all of those have a really clear rationale. But the reason I like targets for this is that it helps everybody understand where we're going and what we're measuring and how we're measuring it. Like all of that's baked into the concept of a target. And I think once you have that trust, we can talk about what kind of data do we hold important as a school? What are we going to be measuring and monitoring, and how are we going to be measuring and monitoring it? Anna, what do you think about the concept of targets here?
I love the targets. As coming from the special educator, goal setting, objectives, that is where you start. And I'm really excited to talk about some ways to kind of hone in on different targets and build that shared vision. I think the targets are essential. You have to agree on what you're trying to do and before you set out. So it's nice to have this conversation now at the end of the school year, at least for most US based schools, because you've got some of the data on how you may have met. Which targets did you meet? Which did you not meet? You're not going to solve everything every year. And once you have the trust, then you're lining up those targets for next year. So this is what we did. What's going to happen next year?
I love targets too, because it doesn't just mean where do we want to get by the last day of school. You can also have targets that are monthly. You can have targets that are, we always want to have 97% attendance, and that just becomes like a daily target. We can have targets for lots of types of data, not just that summative end of year big scary number. So we'll talk a little bit about how to make targets something that we talk about continuously. This next one's a little bit challenging to talk about, because I was really struggling to come up with a word for this component. And I landed on skills, which I think is pretty good. But wrapped up into this concept of skills, or in particular, that your educator, your staff's experience and comfortability and fluency with data analysis. You know, when I think back to my teacher education, like I don't think I got a lot of like data analysis education. Certainly not on the types of apps or software components or websites or data that teachers have in the classroom today. And like reflecting back in your teacher training, like what sort of data analysis training did you get?
Well, credit to Terps and University of Maryland, some pretty good training.
Yeah, yeah.
But when I was thinking about this component of the data culture, even in the last 2 years, in the last year, like there are new tools every year. So as a educator, you're really a learner first. You're learning these new tools. And then you're applying them and you're teaching them. So yes, we've advanced pretty far beyond like, yes, we were using spreadsheets and just like a few trackers.
Yeah.
Now, the good news is that you don't have to do it manually. There's so much automation and so much analytic software that wasn't available.
Yeah.
Wish it was when sped and you're building all of the, you're putting in your CBM data and it's like, okay, this is the week 1, this is the week 2. Well, now with EdTech platforms, that's already there for you.
Yeah.
So now the skill, fortunately, is less about data entry for the most part and more about, well, you have the result, what are you going to do? And what used to take you a week, hours to put in, now you have the answer. So that's what I'm excited to talk about, is what do you do with those results?
Yeah, I love that it's not just skills with the data, it's skills with the tools, skills with the platforms, and even skills with the intuition and the analysis and the decision making. Those are all data skills that as a school staff need to be coached and reinforced and supported. And knowing that every single teacher is on a different pathway to their data comfort, data fluency, data confidence. Everyone needs their own, almost like a differentiated learning plan.
Yes.
Totally. So the last component that I wanted to talk a little bit about is the concept of a data process. And I think the reason that this one comes last is it incorporates all of these other things. It really thinks about what data are we capturing? Where is that data going? Who can access it, see it, manipulate it? How often are we sharing and talking about it? Really building those data practices into the week of a school, into the process that teachers go through. What do you think?
I think this is the key. I think a lot of schools get the first 3 right, but it's all about how you operationalize. And if you build an amazing spreadsheet, if you purchase an amazing tool, it's all about how often you're returning to it and actually coming back to it. So the process, practice, that is essential. And like you were saying with the stool analogy, if you don't have the process in place and you're not going to come back to these data sets, they're not going to help.
And, I'm just going to pop back to our definition really quickly. And I want to think about if that process isn't there, can the decisions get made? Can the accountability be shared? Can continuous improvement even happen if there isn't a chosen and established process for consuming data, analyzing data, and then acting on it? So really, I think the process is a nice synthesis of all of these components.
Yeah, that's a good way to think of it.